So the first question I thought I would ask you is basically, do you see the European Union too optimistic in their new action plan to make the EU climate neutral until 2050? And what are the challenges and possibilities? What do you think?
I think that having ambitious goals is very important in political terms, because then they can first of all respond to the fears and the feelings of the citizens that have been expressed throughout the last couple of years, in particular with the Fridays movement and other movements. But we need a political response. We need a vision, ambitious vision, to be set out, that can mobilize, that can energize people to follow. But I think what is important next to these big goals, and I think it's very good that the EU is maybe being criticized for being too ambitious and not too little ambitious. But I think what requires behind those goals is clear and detailed plans and in particular financial aspect, but also the ideas and plans how to achieve that concretely. And I think that we need to also learn from the experience that we just had with COVID-19. I mean, throughout the last year, entire international and scientific focus was on finding vaccines, on developing vaccines, and then having production chains and delivery chains being developed. And for a year, European Commission, member states, science was dominantly focused on that. But we can see now that, despite all of that, of course, we've managed to develop vaccine very quickly, etc. But when it comes to these practical terms of, producing vaccines, of delivering vaccines, not just to the EU, but also to those who are less developed and poorer, we see problems, we see difficulties. So I think we need to learn from that you might have a big goal, such as we want to have, climate neutral EU by 2050, but we shouldn't be overtaken by that goal and say that, in practical terms, not much needs to be done, because obviously, and it always will be, but we need to really look into the details and policies and their implementation to actually achieve that.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see the willingness of current and future EU citizens, especially regarding the Western Balkan people, to adapt their way of life to achieve the goals of the EU action plan? What is the role of the youth, especially in Bosnia and Herzegovina? Let's say, for an example, the Fridays of Future.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that it's quite encouraging thing that we had these protests and movements across the Western Balkans, from Bosnia and Herzegovina to Kosovo, North Macedonia. I think it's also slightly encouraging that, for example, the fear in the previous Friedrich Ebert Foundation's surveys among the young people, it's clear that the environment and climate tops among the fears among the youth people, tops the issue of future conflicts, of possibility of conflicts. So there is a sense and a feeling. I think it's in particularly visible during winter times when these countries suffer from severe air pollution. So there is the understanding. But what I think is missing, and what will be difficult to handle, is to develop concrete policies that will be implemented, that will then deliver visible results for citizens. And for that, next to good planning, next to good data from the Western Balkans, which are very often missing, you also need to have a political support. You need to have politicians that champion those ideas, those goals, those policies for them. It will not be enough for the EU to have a project. It will not be enough for some EU member states, embassies, or organizations supporting it. You really need a political energy in the Western Balkans. And I would say that, except for some very praiseworthy examples from, for example, Belgrade, or from some other parts of the Western Balkans, where you have small movements or small political parties that are being established on a platform among other of the environment friendly and climate change, we don't see that much across the Western Balkans.
Mm-hmm. And let me ask you, do you think that the governments of the countries in the Western Balkans are addressing the issue of climate change and everything, or do you think they're mainly addressing other issues?
I don't think that they fully grasp and understand the opportunities that dealing with the environment issues and with the climate change provide. I also don't think that necessarily any governments in the world, including those in the Western Balkans, want to disrupt the status quo necessarily, and that will be required and necessary. So what I think is there's a lot of understanding, in particular among the high-ranking politicians in the Western Balkans, that somehow solutions for the environment issues, solutions for the climate issues exist. They have been developed by the EU, and either we need to implement them, but that will cost a lot, or we will, reject and postpone their implementation. I think that there is not a clear understanding, so in that sense, I think what is also necessary is to present the environment and climate-related issues and the potential policies as an opportunity for the economic development, as an opportunity for economic catch-up of the Western Balkans. And in that sense, just as an example, at the moment in Bosnia-Herzegovina alone, you have 11,000 to 12,000 people who are working in coal mines industry. And if your plan is to have, at the moment, 260,000 households in Bosnia-Herzegovina that heat themselves with the help of the coal, if you want to invest in transforming those coal-heated households into environment-friendly heaters, or if you want to change how the municipality buildings, how the government buildings are being heated across Bosnia-Herzegovina, you need to take into account that you need to find an alternative for these 11,000 workers, or for anyone else who's linked to this industry. So politicians and governments in the Western Balkans, as in the EU, will have to make decisions to, strategic decisions to invest in something to solve the problems that will raise on the other side. And to do that, I think they also need a push from citizens. They need to push from the public, but more importantly, they need to understand what this is. And I think we're not there yet when it comes to the governments and when it comes to, in general, to the public. And we need to work more on that.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that the majority of people in Bosnia and Herzegovina understand the gravity of climate change? Do we maybe need a push also from the European Union in raising the awareness of the climate change?
I think that climate movement, the movement, or it struggles to explain to that, and I think that there are both human factors related to that and any others. I think that at the moment, no. I think that if your income is very low and you have to choose between coal as a source of heating and anything else that is either more expensive or that requires you to do remodeling, refurbishing of your house or something else, is obviously not a first choice for citizens. But we see that across the EU as well. So we need a full, big scale projects that the European Commission has, by the way, announced with its green agenda for the Western Balkans to do something like that. And we need to, support that. But I think key in the Western Balkans, if you really don't want them to, lag behind, to be slow, to be, 5-10 years behind the center of the EU, I think what we really need is to disrupt with a political movement, with other measures, disrupt the idea that that being environmental friendly and climate friendly is costly, that it's for rich people, that it's for that it's what you do when you become rich, and turn it into what it actually kind of is going in a direction in the EU, and that is to change it into an opportunity to create jobs, and opportunity to become more wealthier through being environmental friendly and to being climate friendly. And if we manage to get dozens, hundreds of people in positions or in different spheres of life thinking like that and finding the ways how to do it in that way, then I think we might not just be laggers and doing things when it's giving you less benefits, to say it like that, but to do it in different things. I think we really need to rethink the agriculture in the Western Balkans. I'm just thinking about about Bosnia and Herzegovina. So many people today depend on the agriculture. We need to digitalize it. We need to make it more efficient. We need to use different things that, for example, the Netherlands or some other countries that have been successful with that have, which means quite a lot of investment, which means thinking about what those people that will no longer be able to work in agriculture and that will need to find some other ways of earning through tourism or through some other aspects, how to get them to find higher paying jobs than today. We need to think about how do we put Western Balkans into the chain of production of the EU, in particular of this new climate friendly and green industries. And we need to think about what's the form of relationship between Western Balkans and the EU that would maximize the positive effects of that. Is it the succession process that is not delivering on the reforms, that is very slow, that doesn't lead to EU membership anytime soon? Or we need some intermediate steps like the ones that the European Stability Initiative is arguing for, and that is to offer Western Balkans a single market membership and enjoyment of all four freedoms in order to try to, boost their development and integration with the EU, and not just insist on regional integration of very poor and very not reformed economies like these six Western Balkans economies are.
Mm-hmm. Let's return a bit to the COVID-19 pandemic, which struck the whole of the world in the last year and this year too. How can EU member states and future members cooperate and coordinate in global crises like the one we have now? What can we learn from the COVID-19 pandemic, especially regarding the vaccine support you talked about at the beginning of our interview, the vaccine support of the EU towards the Western Balkan countries?
I think that this year is rich in both positive and negative experiences. I think if we look at these positive ones, learn from them, maximize them, multiply them in different fields, then we will be in good way to say that the Western Balkans has a hope to develop much quicker and to develop in a more prosperous way. If you think about the initiative of green lanes, it basically means that when the pandemic hit in March, when much of the production delivery supply chains were disrupted, where there were things getting slower, even in some EU member states, where the EU said, thanks to some initiatives that had already previously existed, said, if we're going to keep the trade flow open between the EU member states, we must same do with the Western Balkans states. And Western Balkan states as well among themselves said, we want to keep the trade open. And that was extremely successful. You didn't see any disruptions. And you see, on the other hand, if you think in the same period, EU introduced the export ban for protective medical equipment like masks and similar things, which throughout the years, Western Balkans with the Stabilization and Association Agreement, with relying on EU, have almost fully got relied on the EU market, and you could see that disruption of that created quite a lot of problems. So from those two examples, I would say lesson is when the EU treats Western Balkans as part of the EU, as it includes in different initiatives, then both the EU and the Western Balkans have something to gain. When it's done differently because of the geographical place of the Western Balkans being surrounded by the EU, both the EU in at least in the image wise, but also neighboring countries, Croatia, Hungary, Romania, Greece, Bulgaria suffer if the Western Balkans are left out. On the vaccines, I find it a bit ironic that the EU from April did everything that was expected and more to do, included Western Balkans in its EU procurement mechanism for the vaccines. It supported COVAX mechanism of the World Health Organizations heavily to provide also vaccines for the Western Balkans. It has allocated significant money to prepare health systems in the Western Balkans to be able to administer vaccines. But then when the situation in the EU developed because of, I would say, some different elements, we've seen that none of the vaccines started to come to the Western Balkans. And we see that, all the preparation that the EU has invested in, the glory of it has been taken by some other actors like China, like Russia and some other countries.